We gather today to commemorate and honor the life of Bea Harris. With any death, the peace of the divine spark is taken from the world. We gather to respect and reaffirm God's image in every person. Those who be touched form a community here in their grief to express the love, joy, and meaning that He brought to their lives. Mourning is a time filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. In this difficult time, may these loved ones find that God is with them always, even in times of their greatest pain. Their sorrow is heard, their loss is felt. Hear them, O God, and be with them. We begin our service with a recitation of psalms, prayers, and meditations, thus linking Bea's life with the millennia-old tradition of the people of Israel and the eternity of God. Mourning is the price we pay for having the courage to love others. Even in grief, we know that the wonder of human life is too complex and too magnificent to be memorialized in endless pain. The gifts of spirit our loved ones gave us cannot be measured or weighed, nor can they be lost or even tarnished by time. Even in our darkest hours, we know that some of their light and their warmth will always be with us, bringing comfort and courage, in the fullness of time, healing and peace. There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light, long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, even though their time with us is gone. But the star that lights up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. Ishat Kaya Miyutsa, a woman of valor who can find, mother of generations, a woman of valor. She is precious in the gifts that she gave to our family. Her children have found trust and truth in these gifts. We follow in patterns that she taught. She is robed in strength and dignity, and she smiles at the future. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. We benefit and learn from her wisdom. May she always be credited for the fruit of her labor and her achievements, and may she live on in glory. Now we recite the words of the 23rd Psalm. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. I'd like to share some words and I'll take this off because my glasses are blocking that. All right, well, I'm going to try to do that. Thank you, Rabbi Karen, and thanks for setting up the Zoom as well. In these unprecedented times, it brings our family close together, and our friends can be with us as well. I can't believe I'm doing this.
I didn't decide what word. But I'm gonna do it. Okay, hold on. Okay. I got my backup just in case, but thank you. Okay, I've got to get through this. Bea was born to immigrant parents on May 27, 1926, in Brooklyn, New York. She always told me that her family was very poor, but she never knew that. I mean, she never felt that. It's not uncommon for her family to pick up and move in the middle of the night to avoid being evicted. But I guess she never put two and two together as to why they had to move. He was a very, very good student and was able to finish high school at age 16. Apparently, there were two tracks in her high school, in college and business. And when Bea announced she was switching to the business track, her counselors tried to persuade her to stay on the college track. But she moved to the business track and it served her well. When her father died at a young age, Bea had to go to work to support her family. She was able to secure a position in the furrier business in Manhattan, and before long, she was promoted to a managerial position. Excuse me one second. She was okay. So she was supervising people older than she was, and she loved her job, and she would have stayed there forever. In those days, Mom looked just like the old-fashioned Barbie doll. Her hair, she had a long ponytail. She wore high heel shoes. She wore a pencil skirt and tight sweaters, and she was quite the looker. One day, a friend set her up on a blind date, and when this tall, handsome GI came knocking on her door, her mother pulled her inside and said, "Don't let this one get away." And she didn't. The rest is history. Bea and Rick married in 1950 and started a family right away. They lived in Rick's parents' house in Brooklyn until 1956, when Rick was offered a position with Norton Kite in Dayton, Ohio. They packed up their old DeSoto with no air conditioning. It was like a Sherman tank, and went west with their two little ones in tow. It was supposed to be a 4-year stint, but they loved Dayton so much they made it their permanent home. They initially found a 3-bedroom, 1-bath duplex on Delaware Avenue, which served their young family well. By 1962, Rick started his own business, Rick's and Associates, and the Harrises moved to Brock Lane, where they remained till 2014. Life was good. Bea played golf, tennis, bridge, mahjong. She was known far and wide as an excellent cook. She and Rick had so many friends. And did I mention that she loved to talk on the phone? I thought that the phone was permanently affixed to her shoulder. She walked around like this all day long. And this was before call waiting. That line was always busy. And she loved to laugh, but couldn't tell a joke to save her life. She would start the joke and start laughing so hard that she could never finish it and would leave us hanging. She loved to quote old Yiddish sayings as well, but when translated, something was kind of lost in the meaning. Bea and Rick were not helicopter parents. They gave Steve and me plenty of freedom. At least we felt like they did. However, there was no doubt that we were loved, whatever the situation. I always had a safety net, which felt very good. Growing up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, we had the perfect life. Dinner was always on the table at 6 o'clock sharp, and we always ate together as a family. Having structure was very reassuring. Bea lived a great life. Her children never gave her cause to worry. Her grandchildren brought her lots of nauseous pleasure. Her great-grandchildren were just the icing on the cake. And Bea was blessed to have so many dear friends. I truly believe that the wonderful relationships she had with her friends prolonged her life. A friend once told me that when people lose their memory, many times their inner personalities come out. And I'm sure that's happened with Mom. When she could hardly speak, she always said thank you and was so appreciative of the helpers that she had. Mom didn't have a mean bone in her body. She will be remembered as a loving and generous wife, mother, mother-in-law, grandmother, great-grandmother, aunt, cousin, friend. She will be missed. And I want to add that when Mom arrived in Augusta last year, I was able to find her at this beautiful facility. Unfortunately, a month after she moved in, her COVID hit and they were on lockdown, but we were still able to visit outside and all that. But when she moved in, the staff very quickly learned that Miss B, or Queen Bee, as they called her, never left her room until her outfit was completely coordinated, including a matching scarf. So today, to pay homage to her, we're all wearing one of Mom's scarves. We all have it on, every one of us. So we love you, Mom. Love it.
I didn't prepare anything, but I just want the opportunity to cry and have you all listen to it. Apparently,
We're criers.
thank you.
Grandma B was an extremely loving grandma. Every time we went to her house, I feel like she welcomed us with open arms. A few memories I have with her and Al and I have as kids. We always baked little sugar cookies with jelly in the middle. She always helped us make the sugar cookies with the letters, which was something special. We were excited about every time we went to her house. She always had Entenmann's cookies in her, a lot of cookies. She had Entenmann's cookies in her freezer. She always made Jell-O for us. She was an excellent cook. She made delicious, brisket and lamb chops, and just all types of potato pancakes. Just going to her house was always, a fun time, and we have fond memories from that time. She made me fall in love with New York City. They took us there for the first time, and eventually I'd say that's probably, why I moved there. Yeah. I'll let Al talk.
As much as she tried, I never fell in love with golf. She tried her hardest, both her and Pop. I never fell in love with bridge, but she would beat me mercilessly whenever I would come over and we'd play together. She was a Scrabble champion. She knew every word in the dictionary, I'm pretty sure, so she had a huge advantage. But I just
What a couple things I do remember that Grandma B, every single time she saw me, she would make me turn around and make sure that I was staying thin and in shape. So I just always thought that was funny. She was always on a diet her whole life, but she always looked amazing, and she didn't ever need to be on one. And just overall, she was just a super loving, amazing person. Didn't have a bad bone in her body, like Aunt Joan said. She's very humble, and I can only hope that I can instill those qualities in my own kids and carry on, her legacy. So that's it.
I guess the last thing I'll say is I feel like growing up, the Jewish holidays are always our time to get together. So, there's there'll permanently be a seat at the table for Grandma B. Years to come.
We'll miss her a lot.
Drew? You want
Yeah.
Drew?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you can see me, but as long as you can hear me. So three elderly folks were talking. The first says, I got all kinds of issues with my prostate. When I go to pee, nothing but dribbles. The second says, I got a similar problem with my bowels. I push, squeeze, and squirm, nothing but pebbles. The third says, I've got problems like you wouldn't believe. At 7 a.m., I've got a perfect urine stream. And at 8 a.m., just like clockwork, a perfectly healthy bowel with no strain. The first two look at the third in astonishment and say, that sounds like heaven. So what's the problem? The third says, yeah, but I don't wake up until 9 a.m. B would have loved that joke. So how does one begin to describe someone as loving, compassionate, generous, humble, down to earth, selfless, funny, charismatic, and grateful as Bea Harris? How do you describe the person who taught you to love food, appreciate storytelling, the importance of making friends, and the importance of caring for others before yourself? Someone who never tolerated cruelty, bombast, or inequity. Here goes. There's a saying in sports, act like you've been there. When someone scores a touchdown, hits a big shot, how they celebrate says a lot about the person. The best players who accomplish these feats seemingly all the time don't often celebrate because, well, they've been there before. But it's the players who haven't been in the limelight or hit that home run who often showboat, show off, make a bigger deal out of their accomplishment. In short, it's a lack of humility. But there's another meaning to the phrase, act like you've been there. It's the idea that you already belong to an elite club. The idea that you can envision and expect top-tier performance and that a few heroic acts are merely steps along the path to something far greater. If you met Bea later in life, you might have thought she always had a fairy tale life, comfortable lifestyle, golf and bridge with the ladies, trips all over the world, regular winters in Palm Springs, sartorial adornments, et cetera, et cetera. But you see, Bea came from very modest beginnings, a loving family, but not a lot of money, coping with the death of her father at a young age, working her way into managerial roles without formal education, meeting my grandfather, having 2 kids, moving from Brooklyn to Dayton to start a new life. I think it's because she's always kind of acted like she's been there. Even though she was a poor Jewish girl from Brooklyn, she played the Midwestern philanthropist and socialite part very well. She acted like she's always been there. That's not to say any of it was fabricated. The truth is, while Bea has had to adapt time and again, she's actually always been the same loving, generous, humble, and compassionate person. Everything she embodied just translated perfectly. She always lived in the moment. She showed class and humility. She made people feel like they were special. She loved her family and friends, and we all loved her back. And ultimately, I think everybody loved her so much that they just assumed that she was someone like them, someone who had always had her place in life and a seat at the table, someone that they could relate to. And for that, she was one of the greats. I know that wherever she is, however she is needing to adapt, she'll feel right at home and will continue to be loved by all.
That was beautiful. Thank you. to add just a few thoughts to those who knew her best. I would say that such an important part of Bea's identity, as we've heard, was her growing up and being born in Brooklyn, because she truly loved everything about New York. That's where it's happening, she would say. The Jewish delis, egg creams, cultural experiences, museums, and especially theater. She made a point to take each of her grandchildren to New York, and some loved it so much they stayed. She never planned on leaving. In fact, she thought that she would only be in Dayton for a few years. But those 4 years turned into more than 60, and Bea loved it. Daytonians always made her feel so welcomed, and her friends became her family. She practically lived at Meadowbrook Country Club, but she had friends everywhere. She never knew a stranger. She could walk into any restaurant in North Dayton and run into a friend. Partially, it was because of the size of Dayton, but mostly it was because of how many people loved her and considered her a friend. Bea was genuinely interested in people. She wanted to know all about them. She was so fun to be around, quick with a joke, especially one-liners. Everyone seemed to like her and respect her, mostly because she was a good friend. She had not a mean bone in her body. She would put others in front of herself. She only wanted the people around her to be happy. She loved to entertain. As we heard, she was always offering something to a visitor, perhaps cookies, or even in the last several months, when she maybe have had just a candy lying around, she was always being opening and welcoming. And even her caregivers became her close friends. She was loving, honest, generous, dependable, selfless, and humble. She never sought out the limelight. She let Pop do that, I was told. She was never flashy. She never prioritized money or luxury items. She lived modestly and was just happy to be with her friends and her family, whether it was the mahjong, cards, or sitting around her big table entertaining. Another thing that people loved about Bea is that she always had time for them. She would drop anything if somebody called or needed anything, especially her family. And speaking of family, Bea and her sister were so close. She loved to travel, and as we heard, would go to Palm Springs every year to see her. What started out, again, as a short visit, eventually would lead to staying there for 3 months. She had friends there, of course, and she and her sister were always laughing and always joking. We know, as we heard, about what a great cook she was, whether it was her cottage cheese, pancakes, turkey omelets, great latkes and matzo ball soup, or perhaps those Chinese foods or jello. She could always look at a recipe and try to mimic it on her own. She loved bread, especially from Old Hickory. But she always knew what candy was, but she was always on a joke. She was always paying attention to her family and telling them, of course, as she was always a grandmother, she was always a mama too, telling them not to talk to strangers, have safe trip homes, make sure your dress isn't too short, and make sure you're washing what you're eating. Bea loved her family. Those who loved her have said that they always felt that she was there for them and that they were always her favorite. What a wonderful ability to make everyone feel like they're number one. He has always been among the just and the upright in this world. And now we pray that she may continue to rest among the just and the upright forever. Bea, you lived your life with grace and honor, touching the hearts of those who were lucky to have loved you. Your love was truly a gift from God. Through your selfless acts of courage and love, you helped to remind those close to you that we are all created in the image of the divine. With you, others too found the courage to live their lives to the fullest. And so now we pray for you, that your rest and eternal slumber be one of peace. Obviously, words are never sufficient, never enough to this effort. Then now it is time that we let her go into the safety of God's eternal embrace. So we say, Zichronah livracha, may her memory be a source of blessing among us. As for now, a miracle is over. Unique and precious human being is no more to our sight, but a new miracle begins. Our tradition calls it shalom, peace. May her eternal soul ascend to heaven and rest in peace forevermore, as we say.
Amen.
Ask that we all just take a moment to quietly reflect on the wonderful things that He brought to our lives. Adonai Natan, Adonai Lakach, Yishem Adonai Nevarach. God you have given, God you have taken away. Blessed be God's name. Now we continue with the words of El Melech Amin. El Melech Amin. Shochem Bamromin. Hamitzei Menucha Nefona Tachat Kanpei HaShekhinah. In Kedoshim et Shechorim Zohar Harakia Masdirim. Et Nishmat Fasha Bat Ana V'Shlomo Shehalcha La'olamah. Ba'al Harachamim Yastireha B'Seter K'nefav La'olamim. Vayitzur B'tzur HaChayin et Nishmata. Adonai Hu Nechalata. V'tanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkava. V'nomar. Amen. May the source of life, the fountain of all being, open our hearts to compassion and our eyes to wisdom. May we make glimpse into perfect peace and sadness, the way of all things. May Bea's memory be for us a blessing, and may we never let the light of her love grow dim in our hearts. May we remember her worthy and righteous deeds, that her memory be forever bound up in the bond of life. God is our source and our destination, our beginning and our end. May Bea's death awaken us to this truth, with the bond of love we shared and share, not be severed in sorrow. May she rest in peace as we sing.
Amen.
At this time, we will lower the casket. Time we recite the words of the mourner's cottage.
Ishtada Shmerava, Yama Dibra, Yurte, Yamlik Mapuste, the Haye Hon, the Yomethon, Haye Jehovah Israel, Badalah, Isman Kariv, Yuru, Amen. Yehe Shme Rava, Ra, Nam, Me Amai. Isra, Ishtada, Vitorah, 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 Yitzhak, 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 Shemay, Kedusha, Rifu, Elam, Mikol, Yerkata, Yisrael, Tushvata, Venamata, Amiram, Yilma, Rimu, Amen. Yehe, Shlama, Rama, Yishmaya, Chaim, Aleinu, Mi'apo, Yisrael, Vimru, Amen.
Say shalom and Ramah.
Say Shalom, Aleinu, Mi'apo, Yisrael, Vimru, Amen.
So from that, we leave our high, may her memory always be for a blessing. And as we say, may her family be among all those who mourn in Zion, and may you be comforted among them all. This time, I know as was Bea's request, we're going to place some beautiful flowers.
Additionally, we would put dirt on the coffin, but Mom requested that we have rose petals.
This concludes our service this morning. Thank you again for all who participated and for being here. I know that it means a great deal to the family. May Bea's memory always and only be for a blessing. Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi.